Welcome to another biology presentation. This is your presenter, Mr. Mlenga. So in this presentation, we are going to answer a question that came in biology paper 2 for 2015. And this was question 4. So let's look at our question. So this is our question right here. The question reads, figure 4.1 shows a food web in a given ecosystem. So this is a food web which consists of different trophic levels. So we have cabbage, there's grasshopper, there's bird, vulture, lion, human being, rabbit. So we're going to start with our question A1. Identify any primary consumer. So we need to identify any primary consumer from this food web, and you are going to score a mark. So first of all, you need to understand what a primary consumer is. So a primary consumer, these are organisms that eat producers. So producers, we are looking at plants or algae. So examples of primary consumers, we have grasshopper, there is rabbit, we also have cows, and so on and so forth. Okay, so from this food web, you can either pick a grasshopper or a rabbit as a primary consumer. You are going to score a mark. Okay, so this is our answer to our question A1. We now come to our question A2 right here. The question reads, construct a food chain using 3 organisms from figure 4.1. So from this figure 4.1, we need to construct a food chain. So remember, a food chain must consist of the producer, the consumers, and the decomposers. So in this case, we are going to start with the producer. So the producer, these are organisms that produce their own food. Okay, so examples of the producers, we can have plants or algae. So cabbage is in form of a plant. This is going to be our producer. Okay, so from cabbage now we are going to go to the primary consumer. So in this case, you can either pick grasshopper or rabbit. Any of these can be your primary consumer. Okay, so we have picked rabbit. Then we are just remaining with what? Just remaining with the secondary consumer that will feed on the primary consumer. So primary secondary consumers, we can have lions. These can fall under the tertiary consumers. Okay, we can also have birds, which can fall under secondary consumers. So you can either pick bird, you can pick a lion. Okay, you can also pick any that will fit in to eat the rabbit. So let's say we have picked on a lion. So this cabbage will be eaten by rabbit. Okay, and the rabbit will also be eaten by the lion. So if you picked grasshopper here on the primary consumer, you can also pick a bird. A bird can also eat a grasshopper. Okay, so this is our food chain that was required for you to come up with, and you can score a 1 mark. So let us now move on. We now come to our question 3 right here. So our question 3 reads, using the food chain in to construct a pyramid of energy. So remember, in A2 above, we have come up with the food chain, and our food chain in A2 above, it consists of cabbage, rabbit, and the lion. So we need to come up with a pyramid of energy. So this pyramid of energy, it will start with what? The producer, then to go to the primary consumer, then lastly we are going to go to the tertiary consumer, where we have the lion. We picked a lion, so a lion is falling under a tertiary consumer. So we are going to start with cabbage. Okay, so you can use these rectangular boxes. So this one is going to be big because the energy flow here is very high. Okay, then after cabbage, you are going to go to the primary consumer, of which is a rabbit. So the box, this rectangular box for rabbit, is going to be small because as we are moving on from one trophic level to the next, the amount of energy will keep on decreasing. Okay, so this is rabbit. Then lastly, we are going to have lion, which is a tertiary consumer. So this is lion. So I have constructed the pyramid of what? Of energy nicely, as you can see. So this question was carrying how many marks? 3 marks. So you need to make sure that you construct a very neat and nice pyramid. That's when you are going to score all the 3 marks. So we have answered this question. Let us now move on to our next question. Okay, so this is our question B right here. So our question B reads, distinguish between a food chain and a food web. So here we are just going to give differences that exist between a food chain and a food web. So first of all, let's look at a food chain. So this is a food chain. Okay, so this is a food chain. So now, when you look at a food chain, remember, we know that a food chain simply means it's just a sequence. So this is a sequence which is showing how nutrients and the energy flow from each trophic level. So here we are going to have the producers, okay, and these producers, we have got grass, we have the plants, okay, and these plants, they are able to trap light energy coming from the sun, because the sun is the primary source of energy. Okay, so once they trap light energy, they are going to make their own food through the process called the photosynthesis. So now on the second trophic level, we've got the primary consumers, the grasshopper, which will feed on the plants. Okay, then we also have the secondary consumers, a frog, which is also going to feed on the grasshopper. Then we also have the tertiary consumer, a snake, which will also feed on the what? The frog, which is the secondary consumer. Then you also have the next trophic level here, which is the tertiary consumer or the secondary consumer, which can also feed on what? On the snake. This is the heron, okay, which can also feed on the snake. So this is a food chain. Now we also need to know what a food web is. So this is a food web. Now for a food web, you can see it's showing it's a group of interlinked organisms of food chains. So you can see, okay, so now when you look at a food web, it's having more organisms than a food chain. A food chain only consists of fewer organisms, okay, but for this one, it's having more organisms, as you can see. So what differences are we able to see? Okay, so you can notice that a food chain consists of what? One sequence. A food chain, you can see, it's only consisting of one sequence, which is going around, as you can see. Okay, now when you look at a food web is consisting of more or several interlinked sequences that are showing the feeding relationship. You can see you have a snake, there is a kite, a lion, a jackal, a goat, a rabbit. Then you can see how they are being interlinked. Then you have the wild cat, which can also feed on different organisms. A lion can also feed on different organisms. So this is one difference that you can see. Apart from that, you can see that in the food chain, each organism occupies only one trophic level. Here you can see each organism occupies only one trophic level. But when you look at the food chain, the food web, you are able to see that more organisms can occupy different trophic levels, except the what? The producers. So the producers, they only occupy one trophic level, because this is the initial step of the food web. So they only occupy one trophic level. Okay, what other difference can we notice from, apart from the ones that I've mentioned? When you look at the food chain, you can see that here in the food chain, it's having fewer organisms, this one more. I've explained this one. So these are some of the differences that exist between a food chain and a food web. So let's look at how we can now write our answer. So you can say a food chain consists of one sequence of feeding relationships, while a food web has several interlinked sequences of feeding relationships. In the food chain, each organism occupies only one trophic level, while in the food web, each organism may occupy more than one trophic level, except the producers. The food chain involves fewer organisms, while a food web involves more organisms than a food chain. So these are some of the differences that exist between a food chain and a food web. So we have answered our question B. Let us now move on to our next question. Okay, so this is our question C right here. So our question C reads, Explain why organisms at the end of a food chain have the least amount of energy. So we need to explain why the organisms at the end of the food chain, they have the least amount of what? Energy. So this one I've even explained to say the producers, they are going to have the highest amount of energy there because it's the initial stage or the initial trophic level. It's going to be 100. Now, when that energy starts transferred from one trophic level to the next, it will keep on what? Getting lost. So we find that out of 100, 90% of the energy, okay, is going to be lost through different metabolic processes such as respiration, egestion, and excretion, because organisms will be breathing, they will be moving, they will be growing, they will be ingesting, they will be also excreting. So 90% of the energy will be lost to those what processes that I've mentioned. Then only 10% of the energy now is the one that is going to be present, and it's the one that is going to be passed on from one trophic level to the next level. So we can now write our answer. We have said at each trophic level, 90% of its total energy is lost through respiration, egestion, and excretion, and only 10% of the energy present is going to be passed on from one trophic level to the next level. So we have answered our question C. Okay, this is how you can answer it, and this is how you are going to score the 2 marks. So we've now come to the end of our presentation. Thank you so much, everybody. This has been your presenter, Mr. Mlenga. Bye bye.